T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to today's Citizens of Tech podcast. I am Eric Zutphen at Zutphen, and with me is co-host Ethan Banks at EC Banks on the Twitters. You can find every show we've ever recorded along with all of our show notes at citizensoftech.com. Why would you want to do that? Because on Citizens of Tech, we talk about science, gadgets, gaming, astronomy, medical research, energy production, and any other sort of nerdy stuff we run across. We figure if it's interesting to us, it will be interesting to you. Ethan, what's in store for our fair citizens today?
Well, on this, the 25th glorious Citizens of Tech podcast, we revel in the largest dinosaur ever unearthed, a 100-year-old engine that's still running, a harmful poison helping nearsightedness, your hot data, the coming electric car crisis, along with our regular segments, content I like, and Today I Learned. And we jump into a story from the past. This comes to us from arstechnica.com, unveiling the Titanosaur, which may be the world's largest dinosaur. And this was cool. And it's kind of hard from an article to get the scope of this thing, but you know, the summary of this story is they found this massive fossil and they put it on display in the American Natural History Museum. So let me back up and give some details here. So first of all, yes, a monster fossil was discovered. They described in the article a femur the size of your sofa. So to quote this thing is just the find itself made news when images came out of paleontologist Diego Pol lying on the femur of the skeleton, which is roughly the size of a sofa, though far less comfortable. And since then, the team from the Museo Paleontologico Egidio Ferruglio, MPEF, has excavated more than 200 bones representing 70% of the skeleton.
Wow,
Woo!
That's a high percentage, actually.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, I was really impressed with that. It's like, we found a tooth. It was a dinosaur. No,
And it was massive.
70% of the skeletons. They actually have a very good idea of what this thing was like. And here's the thing. They don't think this monster was full grown. This was like a kid.
Holy cow.
Yeah, again, so to quote the article, since the individual belongs to a species that hasn't been formally described, there's no given name to it yet, they do know, however, that it is not a mature adult. Certain bones in this animal fuse when growth stops, and that hadn't happened yet.
Wow.
Huh. Okay, so now everybody's wondering, okay, so how big is it, right? How big is big? Ours says this young adult was roughly 37 meters long, 122 feet, and weighed in at an estimated 63 metric tons. So, and again, there's a model of this thing on display, and they're describing what the space was that they put the skeleton up in. The skeleton filled an entire room that could easily fit hundreds of people, and it was arranged so that its head jutted out the doorway and into the hall beyond. Whoa. From a distance, everything looks roughly proportional, so it's difficult to appreciate just how big everything is. It's only when you drop your gaze low enough to see how the legs compare to full-grown people that the size of it is really driven home.
Man.
It's just awesome.
And it's what's it even full grown?
I know. It's just I hope they find more eventually someday and have it's just who knew, right?
Wow.
And if you're wondering where this thing is on display, again, American Natural History Museum in New York, and by it we're talking about a fiberglass cast of the bones that are on display because the skeleton, again, to quote ours, a skeleton on display is made of lightweight fiberglass casts, as the actual bones would weigh far too much to support. So,
right. They've been fossilized. They weigh, they're basically stone at this point.
Yeah, exactly right.
Did the article say where they found this thing?
In the ground. It may have, but I did not write that down in my notes. If they did, it was a pretty lengthy article, so I just picked out the highlights about the size of it.
I'm gonna have to go back and read through the whole thing.
The other thing that's scary is what did this thing eat, right? Because T-Rex, we know he was a man-eater, and Jurassic Park preys on our fears. I mean, how many of you can go to an outdoor potty now without fear of T-Rex taking the top and chewing you and having you for dinner?
If it's raining and I'm in the jungle, I'm not going in a porta potty.
Exactly. So take comfort, people. It is thought the Titanosaur was an herbivore, although that is speculation right now. Quoting ours one more time, it also has distinctive teeth, and although they're not sharp, they're pointier than you'd expect for an herbivore. So what they think is the teeth worked like big rakes, Novacek told ours, adding that the dinosaur simply obtained as much foliage as possible, but didn't actually chew it.
Huh.
And they had some more stuff in there. They said based on its bone structure, it probably couldn't move its head all that well. So they kind of anticipate that it moved side to side and just kind of grazed, pulling up whatever vegetation it could and chucking it down whole.
Like a massive prehistoric cow.
Yeah. Although, again, pointier teeth than you'd expect. It's not like a flattened tooth designed to masticate and turn that vegetation into pulp. So, interesting.
It makes sense, though, because the larger the herbivore you're talking about, the more they're going to need to consume to support that size. So, if this
vegetation is not calorie dense, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Every dieter knows this. Have as much salad as you want. I hate salad. Have as much as you want, though. There's no calories in it.
Anger issues.
I'm a Titanosaur.
This was a really cranky dinosaur, wasn't it?
You can imagine. Well, something else that was old, Eric.
Yeah, not quite as old. Nowhere near as old, actually, but it's pretty old for what it is. So this Dieselpunk shrine hides a century-old, fully operational 800 horsepower motor. This comes to us via Gizmodo. And it was just really cool, and I felt like we had to include it. It's a relatively ancient, obviously not as old as the Titanosaur here, but it's a 103-year-old diesel motor that's still functioning, and it's, to quote the article, close to the gorgeous towers of the Abuda Gas Works. There is a humble church-like brick building housing an amazing piece of engineering, a still functional 103-year-old Sulzer diesel motor connected to a GANS generator.
Okay,
So,
generator. You answered one of my questions. Okay.
Yeah. Why is there a 103-year-old diesel motor? Yeah. It isn't, just any old underpowered engine from yesteryear. This thing's a monster. And yeah, its purpose was electricity generation. Again, quoting from the article, the 4-cylinder 800 horsepower. So take that in. 4 cylinders making 800 horsepower. 180 RPM stationary engine was built in 1912 by the Lang Flam Machine Works of Budapest, based on the license of the Swiss industrial engineering and manufacturing firm Sulzer. The 2-story machine supplied 110-volt direct current electricity for the gasworks with the help of the attached generator. Next to it is a control room, and behind that, a switchgear and distribution room.
Okay, so this thing isn't spinning fast. You said 180 RPM. So 180 RPM, 800 horsepower. It's got to be burning an astonishing amount of fuel per RPM. I mean, the cylinders, the combustion chamber in this thing, it can't be very efficient at all.
Yeah. The thing that really struck me about this was there are so many great pictures in the Gizmodo post. It's definitely worth your time to take a look and look at these things.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, some of the pictures that came out in this article, they were art to me, just of themselves. The way it wasn't merely documentation of the site and the engine. The whole space that the engine is in, the way they've maintained it, and the pictures that they took of it were well lit. Just beautiful stuff.
Yeah, very, very well composed photos, and it really detailed the exquisite manufacturing process that went into this thing. You look at all the gauges and the pipes and wires and everything was just impeccably made, and it really was a testament to yes, we've come a really long way, but really good engineering existed well before the modern generation was here.
Engineering and machining.
Yeah, and it's a precision that you don't usually see, at least with general purpose machinery.
I guess in a sad way, it's kind of a reminder that 100 years later, we're still burning stuff to generate electricity by and large.
Yeah.
Coal and whatever.
We're getting there, but yeah, we're still burning stuff.
Solar is so expensive, as you and I have both investigated and learned. We're getting there, but boy, oh boy. It just kind of sucks that we're still burning things. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, there's another story here. Some current research that's happening. This comes from NPR, National Public Radio, npr.org. Could atropine eye drops help reduce nearsightedness in children? They pose that question and then talk about a bunch of the research that's going on. It was a pretty interesting story. In the 1990s, we've noted here as scientists that atropine had a positive effect on nearsightedness. And interestingly, they don't really know how that works. So, again, to quote NPR, as early as the 1990s, doctors had some evidence that atropine can slow the progression of nearsightedness. In some countries, notably in Asia, a 1% solution of atropine eye drops is commonly prescribed to children with myopia. It's not entirely clear how atropine works. Because people become nearsighted when their eyeballs get too elongated, it's generally thought that atropine must interfere with that unwanted growth. So it's weird that they don't know exactly how it works. And another interesting thing about atropine is it's basically a poison. It's not nice stuff. It shows up in the nightshade family of plants, if I remember the article correctly, like the tomato. Like the tomato. You eat the fruit, you don't eat the stem that it came from. That would be bad for you.
Yep.
So atropine's not nice stuff. So it's just a case of a poison having in the appropriate amounts having a positive effect. Still, if you take too much atropine, bad side effects can happen. And if you think back to the days of Olestra, no, we're not talking about oily staining here with atropine, but there is some other stuff. Again, quoting NPR, because it dilates pupils and blurs vision, atropine makes it hard to see up close or stand bright lights. Now, I remember a few eye exams that I had back in the day of having to have my pupils dilated, and that is not a pleasant experience. Have you dealt with that, Eric?
Oh, yeah. It's not pleasant. You have to wear, the darkest sunglasses you can find when you go to leave the office and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, which, that's therefore, even if it helps you with your nearsightedness, that's not a side effect that's going to make it worthwhile. It's like,
right,
you can have the Olestra, but oily staining. No, right. That's not going to work. So obviously the trick then is getting the dosage right. And again, this is really at the heart of this story here. Getting the dosage right is something that they've managed to do. And surprisingly, it was the lowest effective dose. They got the dosage down all the way to 0.01%.
Wow.
Solution. And again, quoting NPR, the children getting the lowest dose, the eye drops that were just 0.01% atropine, had the least worsening of nearsightedness compared with any other group after a 5-year period, which is awkwardly phrased. But in other words, it had the best effect. It affected nearsightedness. It slowed down the rate of your nearsightedness progression the most, despite being the lowest dose, which is kind of counterintuitive. It should be more. It should be more. More is better.
If some is good, more is better. Yeah.
That's right.
Maximum strength, everything.
Again, quoting, and the children on 0.01% atropine had almost no uncomfortable side effects from the eye drops. The researchers reported Monday at the American Academy of Ophthalmology annual meeting in Las Vegas. Monday has no meaning because of whenever you're listening to this podcast, but
a few months ago. Yeah.
Right. However many Mondays ago that was. This is a fairly recent story. And so, awesome, right? So we're going to get this in the U.S. Yes, nearsightedness cured or at least slowed. And no, not so much. And here's the funny bit. In the U.S., you can get a 1% solution, which is something that's been kicking around for a while, but not the 0.01% solution that has no side effects, essentially, and is more effective for you. Yeah. Because the FDA hasn't approved it yet. So, if you want to get the diluted version, families and physicians and other locales need to go get a compounding pharmacy to create it, the article says.
Yep.
And the Food and Drug Administration has approved only the 1% solution so far.
Huh. Yeah, so you can buy the 1% solution and then have them step it down by a factor of 100.
Because why buy it off the shelf in a convenient, ready-to-consume thing? It's got to be hard.
So use cases for this is largely people whose eyesight is getting rapidly worse, right?
Yeah, it's not good for me. I have a very mild case of myopia. I wear glasses when I drive. I wear glasses if I'm going to be sitting in the back of a room and need to read a presentation that's at the front because it's too blurry. Otherwise, I have to really strain to read. But it's not getting worse. So for me, suck it up, Banks. You're going to wear your glasses. I'm not the guy. But if my eyesight was getting rapidly worse, then yeah, it appears to be up to a doctor's discretion. One doctor mentioned in this article that, quote, he recommends it for children whose eyesight is rapidly getting worse and needs new eyeglasses every few months, but not for patients who only have mild vision impairment. So, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something to keep our eyes on.
No, you totally went there. I can't even. Were you saving that up? Because the way you said it, you were saving for that. Come on.
I was saving for it about halfway through your last quote. It suddenly popped into my head.
Terrible.
Yeah, sorry.
Terrible.
Okay, so moving into the future. So SSDs, right? We've discussed them in the past. They're starting to replace mechanical hard drives unless you need huge capacities at this point, right? The interesting thing about SSDs is that they're getting faster and faster. And what do things that go faster and faster in computing terms produce? Lots of heat. And SSDs are getting quite hot. This is an article from PC World, and this is specifically speaking about PCI Express SSDs. So these aren't, the ones that you put.
Yeah, the Express is the super fast bus, lots of bandwidth on that bus that goes from whatever peripherals plugged into it to the main board.
Exactly right. So these aren't, the hard drive replacement SSDs that you plug a SATA cable into. These plug directly into your motherboard, and they get, all that bandwidth available. So Intel is basically king of the heap in PCI SSD performance right now. Their current Intel 750 series SSDs are shipping with these massive aluminum heat sinks. The link in the show notes demos this crazy liquid cooling rig. It's really not necessary because they're not hot that you have to liquid cool at this point, but it's more of a, hey, we're going to do this at a show and this will look cool.
It was just a 1-minute video. It wasn't even a minute long, and it was all the pretty lights with the case with the glass windows and blue lighting and showed the water cool hoses going in and out of the heatsink assembly on the SSDs and that kind of stuff. And
the bottom line is that high performance SSDs generate a lot of heat, right? And who knew?
Okay, so who knew? I mean, CPUs, sure, you get that, little transistors turning off and on at nanoscale, and it makes sense. But SSDs, I never really thought about them generating tons of heat. Because, a hard drive, sure, moving parts, a lot of things happening in there. Yeah, they're going to get hot. I get that. But an SSD, I didn't really realize was likely to be such a big heat generator. So
yeah, there's a lot of electricity moving around inside of those now.
Exactly. As you said earlier in the segment, the faster things get, they're going to generate more heat. So yeah, I get it. It. Well, another story from the future here, potentially, Jalopnik. Jalopnik is an automotive site. They've got lots and lots of content. And I am a bit into cars, as are you, Eric. So Jalopnik's one of those sites I've been reading a bit lately. They had this kind of forward-thinking article. Are we headed for an electric car crisis? And here's a summary of the article here, just in a few points. First of all, consumer demand is not what's driving electric car sales because, for the most part, people would rather drive SUVs if sales are any indication. Which it's kind of true, right? People are buying hybrids, Eric, I would say, but pure electric cars. What you've got a few choices, right? You've got the Tesla that most people can't afford, and the 99% can't afford, and then you've got the little ones like the Leaf and the Chevy Bolt that was just announced, not the Volt, which is a different car, but the Bolt, and whatever else you probably know better than me. That all have the range anxiety problems.
Yeah. Most of them get, less than 100 miles. Some of them get, slightly more, up to 200, I think, in the new Leaf. But yeah, range anxiety is a huge issue unless you're able to shell out nearly $100,000 for one of these things.
Plus, these cars are typically small. These pure electric vehicles are really tiny. And Jalopnik makes the point here to quote them, given the chance, Americans will default to bigger cars every time. Not hybrids and EVs, but trucks and SUVs. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I guess I think if Tesla was affordable to the mass market, I think they would do well. Do you think they would do well if everybody could afford one? Yeah,
and I think when the new consumer, every Joe model comes out in 2017 or 18, I forget what the date was. When that happens, I think we'll see faster adoption, but they're still, they're so expensive that they're pretty rare around here, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I see them up here in New Hampshire because you don't have the range anxiety problem, and there are some people with the income that they can afford to drive a Model S around. So you do see them every now and again. And we were all the way up at Mount Washington last summer for the Alternative Energy Summit, and someone had a Model S up there, which kind of proves, I mean, yeah, range anxiety, not a big problem if you're driving a Model S with the right battery pack.
Yep.
But again, to go back to Jalopnik's point, automakers are not making EVs, electric vehicles, because it's what consumers are asking for. They're making them because they have to, due to regulatory compliance. Okay,
right.
So let me quote this the Jalopnik article again, because they give us some really interesting stats. So they say automakers are going green, not just to save the planet, but because they have to. By 2020, California will require 10% of all sales to be EV or fuel cell cars, and nationally, fleets have to be, get this, 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025. Woo! Because right now, we're at about 24.7 miles per gallon average. And yeah, oof, as Jalopnik says. The results are what industry folks are calling a two-tier market. One market full of SUVs and trucks people actually buy, and one with the money-losing compliance vehicles of EVs and hybrids that people aren't buying. But they, but we make this, this Bolt, Chevy Bolt or Nissan Leaf or whatever it is. Sure, no one's buying them, but if you look at it as in the lineup of our fleet, it brings our averages to where it needs to be.
Right, because it gets 110 miles per gallon equivalent or what have you.
Everybody's buying trucks, but hey, it's not like, I mean, they could buy it if they wanted it. They just don't want it. What do you want me to do? So now, so the title of the article was, "Are we headed for an electric car crisis?" And the challenge comes in here in the cost of research and development for an EV. If you're a small automaker, it's hard to sink hundreds of millions or billions of dollars into development of an automobile that no one's going to buy. And so what we're seeing here is that automakers with deep pockets are making this work because they can sink the funds into the R&D required to put an EV on the road.
Sure.
But smaller automakers are struggling with this. They do not have the deep pockets. And so some of them are buying credits to keep up with compliance requirements. Quoting Jalopnik again, it's the classic battle between market forces and regulators, but the latter, the regulators, aren't going to back down, even when it forces smaller automakers like Mazda or Subaru or the cash-strapped ones like Fiat Chrysler to buy electric vehicle credits to stay in compliance. And of course, Eric, right now, I mean, when's the last time you went and bought gas? It's super cheap right now, right?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the big reasons we decided to buy a hybrid right now is because the prices are so low on hybrids. But yeah, it's super, super cheap. I think I paid I filled up my Impreza, my 2012 Impreza for I think $24. Went from the gas light on to a full tank. I don't remember the last time I could do that.
And it's the same with me. I'm looking at the prices, and they kind of dipped to $2, and I was like, ooh ah. And then they went to $199. I was like, ooh ah.
No, it's like $186.
I saw it on the discount. If you're on like Cumberland Farms, one of the local chains here has got a discount plan that'll give you 10 cents a gallon off. It's $177, I think. Man. For a gallon of gas, 87 octane. It's unbelievable.
It's the lowest prices in almost 15 years.
Just and not going to change soon, based on a news report I heard recently. Whatever's going on between Saudi Arabia and Iran, I think, is part of the politics between those two nations are what's keeping the price artificially low because the market is just flooded with oil. Yeah. As I understand it.
In respect to, electric vehicle and hybrid vehicle sales, it's not going to do any favors, I don't think, because why would, the average person who doesn't care or doesn't believe in climate change or whatever, why would they go and buy a more fuel efficient vehicle if gas is this cheap?
Well, it's funny. When I bought my Impreza, the fuel economy was a big part of the decision. Okay. Now, I drive much less now since I work from home and I just don't have reason to put that many miles on a car. And so when I bought this Forester, which gets abhorrent gas mileage, it's absolutely terrible, it wasn't a big decision. It was just kind of like, gas is so cheap. Well, I'm not going to worry about it that much.
I don't drive that much. Gas is so cheap now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's your fun car.
It's my fun car. Yeah. So, anyway. Well, content I like. I've been getting into webcomics, and I keep trying them. Some of them I like, some of them I don't. Some of them are kind of low budget. And some of them are just weird and kind of out there. And there's one I'm going to recommend that if you're a nerdy person, this one might appeal to you. It took me a little bit to get into it, but it's called Dinosaur Comics. So Dinosaur Comics, the link is on citizensoftech.com for show 25. But if you're paying attention, Quantz, QWANTZ.com is where you can find the home for Dinosaur Comics. You just Google it. I'm sure it'll show up. And here's what I dig about Dinosaur Comics. It's old school art, first of all. Not hand-drawn. It is actually, the dinosaurs are highly pixelated dinosaurs with a limited color palette. Like if you were a kid doodling on your koala pad with your Commodore 64, you might have conjured this thing, right?
Yeah, it's MS Paint-ish. Yeah.
Oh, very much. Yeah. Better than that, but it's like the best MS Paint you ever did.
Yeah.
Kind of like that. Yeah. And I also think that the panels are the same every time.
Every single one.
I believe so, yeah. Only the words change. So it's the same. It always starts out with a T-Rex, and then a frame or two later, the T-Rex is about to stomp on a house or in a car, and then there's a Velociraptor that shows up. And that's the thing. So it's always a conversation between a T-Rex and what I believe is a Velociraptor, which is also kind of funny because they're both the same size as portrayed in the comic, which of course they weren't. The T-Rex
they lived at different times.
But anyway,
yeah.
So the text is dot matrix. So you remember dot matrix that would have had some sort of smoothing applied to it. So you knew it was dot matrix. Only it was letter quality or near letter quality. If you remember those features from your dot matrix days.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like that is what the text looks like, and sometimes the letters don't even fit on the panel. So you get like the last little bit of the letter D is cut off, and you just only from the word that's what it was, but it's actually truncated in the panel. It's awesome. And then the conversation, there's a lot of text. This is not little 3 words a panel. It's a lot of text he crams into every panel, and it usually proceeds from some sane argument or position that the T-Rex is taking, and it bounces back and forth between the T-Rex and the Velociraptor, and you end up with something completely and utterly insane by the last panel. So it starts out like making some sort of sense, and then it goes way off the rails and takes a sharp left turn somewhere. It's fabulous. And I gotta admit, man, it took me a while to figure Dinosaur Comics out, but once I kind of got it, what they were doing with it, now it's like every time there's a new one that pops up in Feedly, which is the feed reader, you're like, "Oh, Dinosaur Comics!" And I get all excited.
It's one of those delicious things.
Oh yes,
yeah.
So anyway, content I like. Dinosaur Comics. Eric, did you learn anything today?
I did learn something today. I learned that cellophane is biodegradable. So cellophane, here in the United States, you might think of Reynolds Wrap or brand names, but it's actually, cellophane, and it comes from the cellulose from wood, cotton, hemp, or other sources. And I learned this from Wikipedia. So quoting from the Wikipedia article here, it is dissolved in alkali and carbon disulfide to make a solution called viscose, which is then extruded through a slit into a bath of dilute sulfuric acid and sodium sulfate to reconvert the viscose into cellulose. The film is then passed through several more baths, one to remove sulfur, one to bleach the film, and one to add glycerin to prevent the film from becoming brittle. So yes, cellophane itself is biodegradable, but holy mackerel, the number of chemicals used to make this stuff is a bit ridiculous. So go ahead and cover your food with this sulfuric acid-soaked, sodium sulfide-soaked pseudoplastic.
Well, I would have thought it would last forever, so I had no idea.
I thought it was pretty cool. Did you learn something today?
I learned something today, too, and this goes back to our atropine article. In the header of that article, I learned that atropine was called, back in the day, belladonna. So to quote the article, atropine was known as belladonna, and fancy Parisian ladies used it to dilate their pupils, since big pupils were considered alluring at the time.
Oh, belladonna, beautiful woman, right?
Oh. Yeah, there you go.
Very cool.
And with that, this week's Citizens of Tech comes to a close. You can find us on Facebook, visit us at citizensoftech.com, and follow us on Twitter at Citizens of Tech. If you would, please tell your friends about the show and rate us on iTunes. I mean, our download numbers keep going up, and that's good, but it's up to you, fellow citizens, to help drive them higher. World domination. We want it.